Well, well, hello everyone. I'm practicing my new entrance. I promised Vlog Dog. I have one of the two Vlog Dogs. He wants to go down. Good evening, everyone. Vlog Dog 1 and then Vlog Dog 2. Okay, go down on the floor. People, this is going to be phenomenally interesting. This is short notice because it was there was an expression. It said, "Don't count your day. Don't measure your day by the plants that you harvest. Measure your day by the seeds that you plant." I may have mangled it, but that's the overall expression. How's my? Now I might have to take the dog back upstairs. So no one thinks that I'm cheating on Joe Neerman. Hold on. What do you want? Get over here. Get over here. A few days ago, I'd asked Joe Neerman if he could come on during a lunch break to talk about the case, the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, which he has been following day in and day out. Joe Neerman, good logic. You spell it the way he says it. Good logic, because he's from New York. It's LAWGIC. It didn't work out the timing with Joe, but in the meantime, because I had reached out to Matthew Lee of Inner City Press, who is also there day in and day out, and I've got to get his methodology because his ability to tweet updates, from what I understand, he's not allowed having his phone in there. We got to know how he does it. And I'm not going to do much of an intro today because I don't have very much time and I don't know how long I have Matthew for. So that's it. Share the link around, people, because it's super short notice. I would not rely on YouTube notifications to get this done. Have a coffee for all your hard work. Well, I've got something in my little Peter Rabbit cup. Little better than coffee given the time of day. All right. Without further ado, people, let's try to get the numbers up as we do this, because YouTube has not been exactly promoting the coverage of the trial, nor has Twitter for that matter. We're going to bring in the man of the hour, Matthew Russell Lee of Inner City Press. Matthew, how are you doing?
Okay, I'm doing pretty well. I'm doing all right. As you may have heard. Wait, are you?
Okay, sorry. My computer was on mute. What did you just say?
Okay. Oh, good. All right. I wanted to make sure that mine wasn't. I'm doing pretty well. It's for the last couple of weeks. It's been a pretty grueling pace with the trial. Today, things were suspended as one of the prosecutors called in sick, or actually came in sick and then left. So the trial was suspended for the day, which allowed me to sort of look into other things around the courthouse.
When you say came in sick, I always envision vomiting and that type of sick. Came in. It
was less mysterious. It was less mysterious. To my knowledge, all four prosecutors came in, and then after a single witness, the prosecution, after speaking to the defense, said that they wanted a robing room discussion with Judge Nathan, which basically means not only the jury doesn't hear it, but we don't know what was said. In fact, after that, Judge Nathan came out and said one of the prosecutors is ill and needs treatment. There's no reason to believe that it's COVID related, but in the interest of saving the jurors' time, she would let them go for the day. Later, the prosecutor's press office sent out a release asking us to voluntarily not report which of the prosecutors it was. So I had to change my story, but which I did when I got it, even though I'm a little. I mean, I wonder about the. I guess when you get into health issues, it seems to make sense to me.
Well, but that's like a health issue requiring treatment is a very interesting. I mean, that's intense.
I mean, what it is. I guess what I want to say is, we can get into this. However much time you have, I acknowledge that almost all of the journalists here thought that was a no-brainer. It's sort of like the ethics of not reporting the names of the survivors, although I think that's a different issue. But there seems to be a kind of a consensus. I've been a journalist not only here in the courthouse, but previously at the United Nations, where I did always what I thought was right. I ended up being physically ousted and remained banned from the United Nations. So I'm not running scared. I'm just trying to learn how to play a different music to stay on a beat that I like covering. And in this way, I'm still covering the UN beat, but I'm just covering it from outside.
Well, so this is a good segue into, before we get into the substance of the discussion, into you. I don't know very much about you at all.
Okay. All right.
Who are you? Where are you from? How did you get into doing what you're doing?
Okay, well, I'll keep it short. It could be a long story, but I'm more than willing to do it short. So I'm Matthew. I'm going to say Matthew Russell. I'm Matthew Russell Lee. I started Inner City Press. I'm the founder. It began as a very grassroots thing in the Bronx here in New York City, covering abandoned buildings and environmental justice. It was literally a hard copy newspaper before. it's evolved over time. And I would say my last two beats, which I've really enjoyed, although one ended, one had a punctuation mark on it, was from about 2006 to 2018. I know the date exactly. I covered the United Nations very closely. The UN is kind of like the courthouse in the sense that like big wire services cover it. There's not a lot of independent media. You kind of have to show that you're serious to cover it. And then when you do, you're sort of treated differently. You can either respond as I did there, which was sort of outing the kind of groupthink and pro-UN stance of those journalists, much to my detriment, being thrown out, or as here, just sort of try to find a niche. Or what I like about the courthouse, and it's something I've thought about a lot, is that there's so much going on. I mean, right now on the Maxwell case, that's all anyone's covering. So It's a kind of for me, it's a bit uncomfortable because I'm going out of my way not to read other people's coverage. I think I probably should to stay up to the moment, but I know how I'm opinionated, and I think that some things that are being reported are simply not the case. And I'd rather not get into that. I just report what I see. So it's a different, but usually in the courthouse, like this afternoon, I'll give you an example. Because the case wasn't going on, I was able to sort of roam free. There's a case, it's actually kind of a related or similar case, Kevin Spacey, the noted actor who flew, in fact, with Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Bill Clinton on a famous Africa junket fiasco. He's charged in a civil case with sexual abuse of a 14-year-old boy here. And it's a case that I've covered. Probably if the Maxwell trial had been going, I wouldn't have been able to cover. As you know, as a lawyer, I'm a lawyer too, by the way.
Actually, let's stop there for a second. Your professional training, I didn't know you were a lawyer.
Now you do.
Born and raised in what state? I
was born in Washington, D.C. Then I moved around a lot. So I'm pretty much of a New Yorker. I've lived in New York most of my life. So and I'm a New York lawyer. I'm a New York. I'm ready to. If you come and slip and fall, I don't really practice in that way. But I am. It's weird. To be honest with you, I went to night school, and I went very much as a not really as a kind of straight as a way for a profession. I had become an activist, and this was to me like one of my initial kind of legal issues was. At this time in New York City, there were a lot of abandoned buildings. So I personally became a homesteader. Like it's kind of libertarian, you could say. Like the buildings are empty, nobody's in them. I fixed one up. I was living in one. I started a newspaper. People wanted to fix them. We fixed them, and then the city decided they wanted to evict us. Okay, no problem. There are due process rights even for squatters in New York. They're not as insane as they're not as strong a protection as say in Berlin or other places that I've heard of. But there are some protections, But they're only protections, like if it's a private landlord, they have to serve you, they have to take you to court, they have to prove that they sought your name, that you're not just John Doe, all that. And we became very good at playing that game. The city just says it's an emergency, you're out, and then they knock down the building while you're out. So you have no rights against the government. So I decided I would go to law school at night. I went to law school at night. I used the law a little bit to in that context. But I'll give you an example. This is going way back. It's up to you if you have enough time. We applied to Con Edison, which is the utility company, right? We'd fix up a building, it was sitting empty. Nobody wanted it. We did it. Initially, you can sort of pilfer electricity, not so much stealing. People do it all the time. If you're washing your car and you plug into a street lamp, or you're just doing is, but eventually we did want to pay. So we said, we're willing to pay. They said, no, if you can't show us, we're not going to turn it on. And the city told them, don't turn it on. So we turned it on under the street. So they came and poured cement and stayed with police until it dried. So we came back with a jackhammer and turned it back on. Eventually, and this was the great thing about legal training, I looked at it's called the Public Utilities Law of New York. And it said you don't have to own the property. All you have to do is show that you had a licensed electrician do the work and that you don't owe a back bill to Con Edison. So we whipped open McKinney's consolidated laws, and next thing you know, the lights were on. And next thing you know, the city sent 400 riot police and threw everyone out, giving many of them apartments. In fact, people made out like bandits. Like the government, instead of just allowing poor people to do for themselves, preferred to destroy their work and give them, apartments that cost $100,000 to renovate, just to sort of break them into groups. I mean, I had a lot of theories about it at the time, but I've moved on since then, and now I'm covering the courts, and I'm loving it.
Okay, and hold on. I had one question. I was going to say that what I knew about pilfering electricity came from the book "The Invisible Man," because I'm from Montreal.
Sure. I never heard a long history of it, and often you're forced into it. I have a lot of there. I've actually come across some of these cases here. I have a lot of. One time, I mean, this is a long story, but I was a real community, like as they say, I think of Obama famously. I was a community organizer. I mean, I took a job with a community organizing group, kind of well-known one, but I ended up not liking it because the maybe you're not surprised. I didn't, and it was very concrete. The reason was very concrete. They sent me to this part of Brooklyn where it was like very hard scrapple. There were some homeowners, but there were a lot of people trying to like build things in vacant lots. So I'm pretty much on the side of the people building the vacant lots. I like that. No, they said you have to, the way that it's like a Saul Alinsky idea. The way to build power is to let people win small victories. So you say to them, what do you want? And so the homeowner said, what I want to do is to get this guy on the vacant lot thrown the hell out. He's selling food. He's an eyesore. I want the guy on the vacant lot out. And you were supposed to, if you work for this group, say, okay, I'm not judgmental at all. If you want to throw the guy out, let's do it. I'm pretty much feeling an affinity to the guy there. And I also think it's a very short-sighted way of organizing. I don't think you should be paternalistic and tell people what they should want, but to just say like, it just depends who you're organizing, but it's
So you get your law degree. First of all, how many generations American? I'm always curious about this. Like how far back?
My grandfather came from China. That's why my last name is Lee. I'm a quarter Chinese.
Okay.
Which is ironic because I'm now at the UN. I was thought of being very anti-China because I determined that the UN is entirely dominated by China, and it is in ways big and small. But the last two secretary generals, well, the current secretary general in particular, has essentially taken bribes from China, and it's an extreme. Maybe this is why I was thrown out, but I can show that China, they sent business people, as you know, that's like a state. They have state businesses, and they have a concept, and it's called Belt and Road. Their idea is that they're a developing country. They're going to help Africa and the developing world to build transportation and screw human rights, move into the developed world. Basically, they're making very high interest loans, taking every tree they can turn into furniture in China. And they're getting the UN to give its blessing to this essentially kind of neo-colonialism and call it sustainable development, and it's great. And they literally with bags of cash, they bribed one president of the General Assembly who said famously, it was proved right in this Southern District courthouse, he said, if you pay me $25,000, I'll come on a trip to China and talk about sustainable development. If you want me to bring the UN flag, you've got to pay 50. And they did. So he was indicted and died awaiting trial. He was supposedly lifting weights in his home in suburban Dobbs Ferry. His name was John Ash. He was a diplomat from Antigua and Barbuda. It's a famous case.
No, I think it ended up with a dumbbell on his neck, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly. He died by his own barbell. A lot of people were like, because it's a long story, but it got somehow bound up with the Clintons. It was very strange though, because they said that I covered that case all the way through. And here's the biggest thing, totally outside of the conspiracy of whether he was killed or this crazy way of dying made any sense. The UN never reformed. Like the same thing that happened with John Ash and Eng Lap Seng was the briber happened 4 years later with a guy called Sam Kutesa, who was the foreign minister of Uganda, who became the president of the General Assembly, and a Chinese businessman called Patrick Ho, famously of the China Energy Fund Committee, which was they gave the diamond to Hunter Biden. Anyway, some of these things go left, some go right, but it's all true.
No, I'm not even laughing at that. I mean, sure. This is like another realm of a rabbit hole where I don't deny that it's true at all.
It is. I mean, is.
And it is. It's just like it's another realm of like we've entered another part of what is it called? Another part of the fractal of the information of the world that I had not been paying attention to.
Sure. I'm sorry. I'm sure you didn't expect it. I'm more than willing to get down and dirty. In fact, I have your cheat sheet, which I hope doesn't demonetize our discussion.
Oh, forget that. Don't worry about that. I think you already said one. You already said one of the flag words, but no.
Oh, have I already did? Oh, I'm sorry.
Don't worry. Don't worry. That was so. I had no idea about your last name because I know someone whose last name is Chen, and no Asian descent whatsoever. Right. It's short. Actually,
so yeah,
it was shortened from an Estonian last name. So I had no idea of your history or of your professional training. Although
it's a little bit weird. I mean, I do, and now maybe this is a good transition because I want to give you the red and raw meat on matters Ghislaine Maxwell. I've now done like these. I do filings, and of course, journalists are free to do filings. Whether you don't have to be a lawyer to do it, and I actually don't. In making these filings, I don't want to create a precedent that only only journalists that are also lawyers should be able to.
But hold on.
Judge. Go ahead.
Stop right there. Explain to people who don't know what a filing is. That might be me as well. What's a filing in the
I guess I may not understand fully, because, and I'll tell you why. Obviously, if you're a litigant, if like a lawsuit has begun, okay, in this case, the U.S. government, arrested Ghislaine Maxwell in New Hampshire, so she's now a party to the litigation. She can do filing. She has 4 lawyers. Normally, a civil case will happen. I'm actually here late writing up cases. Somebody sues somebody. Let's say the Kevin Spacey one, because it's. I think that's where I broke the rules. What is he? He was engaged in. He actually calls it child abuse. He calls it child abuse. We know
what Kevin Spacey has been accused of, and we know what has happened to a lot of those witnesses. For whatever witnesses, people with connections, they things happen to them. Not dumbbells, but other stuff.
He was shuffling his house of cards on the 14-year-old. Now 44 years old. The previous victim has sued him. So they're litigants, and they can each make filings, and they have discovery. What I'm talking about is that there is also a lot of case law about the right of the press and the public to have access to, particularly in criminal, but also in civil things, to have access. Anyway.
Lighting still.
I'll jump up or speak loudly. It'll turn itself back on. What I've taken to do is when I first got here, people weren't doing it. And I don't do it. I could probably get do an official filing through the ECF system and say I want to be a party to the case. I kind of don't want to be that kind of gadfly guy, and I don't want to. I send in an email with some case law, and I say I think this document should be unsealed. If they choose to just unseal it and they don't even say why they did it, it's fine with me. If they don't, I'd prefer them to put the letter into the docket, i.e., make it part of the case. Actually, I don't think it should just be between the journalist and the judge. The judge says the journalist says to the judge, "Your case is too secret. Unseal it." In fact, what the judge should do is to say, "I only sealed it because they asked for it to be sealed. I'm going to ask them to respond to your filing." That's why it becomes a filing, because it's not. You can't. I always send a copy to like in this one. I sent a copy of my letter to Maureen Comey. This is how it works.
And just to simplify it out there, it's effectively an interested party saying, "I'd like to see something in this file." Cernovich did it in the. Cernovich did it actually.
He did. I was there that day. Yeah.
Okay. In the
Julie Brown and Dershowitz and that whole case.
And so the judge can say, "What's your interest?" And your explanation is, "You've alleged it. I'm a member of the press. I want to have access to this from my profession." Let me just ask one. I don't know the answer to the question, so I hope it's: are you still a member of the bar?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
I am.
So not disbarred.
It takes a little bit. I'd have to do. I listen to my CLE on headphones on the subway. And there's a lot of steps you got to walk through.
What is your license? What is it in New York? What's the license a year? Is it
it's 2 years? It actually is quite. It's one of the reasons that I see you getting your coffee money there. But if anyone is interested in keeping me in good standing, it's literally like $400. I would say you're supposed to pay more if you $400 every 2 years, and if you want to. Do pro bono. I figure I'm doing pro bono most of the time, so I don't do it by money. I'm also licensed in DC. So if you have a problem down there, just let me know. And I'm covering cases in DC too. So it's interesting. I'll be honest. I really didn't at the time that I did it, and even while I was covering the UN, I had no idea how things would go. I didn't know I'd be thrown out of the UN. I didn't know. I was sort of to be very honest with you. After I was so mad about that I covered the UN literally from the sidewalk out front and a public library a block away. For about 6 months. It was my position that I can cover it whether I'm in or not. And then I remembered I'd come to this courthouse, Southern District of New York, to cover these 2 UN corruption cases. And I'd really enjoyed it. And at that time, I'd said to them, so I'd have to leave my phone. I said, how does it work? How do you become a journalist over here? They said, you can't just be one shot Johnny. You can't, if you just come here for one case, whether it's Ghislaine Maxwell, whatever the case is, there's a lot of people here. They've come in from the UK. They've come in from Australia. They're not journalists here. If you want to be like part of the quote in-house press, you've got to show that you're covering at least 6 cases. These days, I cover 6 cases a day. It's kind of absurd. I'm anything that moves,
And it's like establishing credentials. It's like someone off the street could have painted a Picasso work, but had they not shown the history of Picasso, it won't be taken seriously. So I appreciate that and the work you have to put in. And to that end, I actually want to bring this one up. Appreciate your work, Matthew. This is from Jay. Much needed work in these times of censure. Good work getting him on, Viva. Yeah, I actually, I had no idea anything about you other than what I've seen on Twitter.
Well, there you go. I don't know. You probably have seen. I've actually toned down in the last 2 weeks. Usually, you'll get a lot more anti-UN invective, but I realized that some people don't join me in that. So I've sort of, I've got a couple of other accounts. I've kind of downplayed it, but I did only yesterday. at around this time, I did a 56-minute handheld phone live stream outside a grotesque gala that I call, it's going to run afoul of our George Carlin list. So it was disgusting. Though. It was a fundraiser claiming that the UN is in favor of freedom of the press, and which obviously to me is quite ironic because they may not like my questions, but like I write a lot of stories. Many people read them. In fact, I felt like they just don't. Here's a real thing that couldn't happen anywhere else in New York City. Like if I went to City Hall, which is close to here, and Mayor de Blasio or incoming Mayor Adams said, "I don't like that guy. Get him the hell out of here." I could go to court and I would be back in a day. Probably they'd have to pay damages. But the United Nations is not covered by any law. They're in New York, but they're not covered by the First Amendment. They're not covered by anything. In fact, there's one of the reasons I'm not stopping covering them is that I believe the concept is good, but the immunity is a real problem. There was an earthquake in Haiti. They sent peacekeepers from Nepal. They brought cholera and 10,000 people died. And I'll tell you that they didn't pay 1 cent, nothing. Coca-Cola would have had to pay. Anyone else in the world would have had to pay something because that's how it works. They
sovereign
didn't pay
immunity
nothing.
And we've talked about like sovereign immunity, government immunity. It's a beautiful thing. It's almost like immunizing manufacturers of certain other things.
Right.
And you operate. You're not even outside the law. You are above the law. It's.
And I want to just say because I sometimes get people saying to me like, you have to understand it's the law. Look. I think my point is I think diplomatic immunity was created. The only way you could get countries to send ambassadors to each other's place is that they wouldn't be taken kind of hostage. Like as soon as the countries get into a dispute, you grab the ambassador and say, charge him with one of the unsayable crimes and lock him up. No. So you say diplomatic immunity means one country can't lock up another country's diplomat. I don't know where the UN gets it. The UN is not a country. It doesn't have the same. And then they try to say, well, it's because it's like the Good Samaritan laws. And there are some, right? As you know, there's this is not to like get too law schooly, but like there's a different standard. If you stop your car and voluntarily as a doctor try to help somebody by the side of the road, if you make a small mistake, you're not going to have to pay because you're only going to be liable for gross negligence, right? If you're in a hospital getting paid as a doctor and you forget the sponge inside, you're going to get sued. So, whatever. So, but the UN is like, hey, we're going to get out of our car. We're going to commit terrible acts of trafficking on you, and we're not going to pay anything. And we're going to fly the peacekeepers home. And if any journalist asks what's going on, we'll just throw them out too. And then we'll have a big gala at a fancy place in Lower Manhattan and whoop it up.
I've got to ask the broad question because it was my question as to why you got interested in Ghislaine Maxwell, but it seems that you're interested in corruption in general. And I've got to bring it back because this doesn't just occur naturally.
It did. She was in the UN. In fact, I became aware of this case in my private period. And if you don't mind, I'm going to say I was there one day. I think it was around 2013. So at that time, I was in totally good standing. I had an office in the UN. I was covering things. I was thinking like, maybe I'll make a movie about the UN. I could run from my little office with my handheld camera and I had all these ideas of what to do. And suddenly they said Ghislaine Maxwell is having a press conference today in the UN briefing room. And even then, I'd heard of Epstein. And I mean, it's hard not to, right? I'd heard these people were kind of known to be engaged in trafficking, and in conditioning and the use of toys. So I went to the press conference and where they had sort of packed in some sort of faux journalists to say,
if I can actually just stop you there. Absolutely. This is known in 2013, but it had been the best kept secret for a long time.
For a long time. This goes back to the 90s. Yeah, this goes back.
I want people to appreciate that. Like this is known from anyone who's paying attention at the time in 2013, but it's not new information at that time. This has been known for years, decades, possibly. Okay.
Yeah. Actually, no, you're right. I mean, I'm actually now that I'm like having to think about almost because it's a very grueling trial day. I'm sort of having to put other cases to the side. It really is, and I know many people have spent a lot of time on this case, but it's pretty shocking. It's not just the non-prosecution agreement that was gotten in Florida toward the tail end. It's all of that time, all of the complaints that were made. I mean, this was it's even just looking at Palm Beach, Florida, even forgetting, a ranch in New Mexico and an island in the Caribbean and an apartment in Paris. And as was testified yesterday at the trial, flights to Tangiers, Morocco, just looking at Palm Beach, this guy from the 90s on was buying the teenage girl population of West Palm Beach openly for $300 a pop. And people looked the other way. People said, hey, what are you going to do? People, there's a guy that I think was doing the phone service on the Little St. James Island down on St. Thomas that said every time he went to like install these $40,000 phone lines, he saw, 14-year-old girls topless by the pool, and nobody did anything.
Well, here, so let me ask you this, because this sort of fits in. Are the prosecutors going out of their way not to bring up Maxwell's friends' names as much as I've heard? Well, you're going to feel that at some point. Thank you for the chat. But now the question is this. One of the theories of the case is that Epstein had an insatiable appetite. Mm-hmm. And that, I guess it's to give the illusion that all of this, which we know has been done, was done for and only for Epstein.
Right.
No, I'm not going out on a limb to say that everybody knew that what was being done was by no means for either Maxwell or mm-hmm. Epstein themselves, but for others.
Sure.
And then the question is going to be my $1 million question, which I sort of know the answer to. Why are there no other names being named? Not in terms of alleged victims, but alleged participants in all of this, because this was by no means a strategy that was just to satisfy the needs or desires of Ghislaine and Epstein themselves. Why have no other names been named? And that brings us to the super chat.
Right. I'm going to I'll play devil's advocate here, because I agree. I get a lot of, particularly in the last 2 weeks, but other than that, a lot of communications from people that think it's basically a cover up, that basically, and I'm phrasing this as one theory of the case, which is that they're trying to do as little as possible to keep it as limited as possible, maybe get a conviction, maybe not, but to be able to say, hey, we did it. We brought the prosecution. And I think here's the thing that they could say. And I think this is not, they're not in the business of social change or social reform or cleaning up these various crimes. They're prosecuting one individual. And I could imagine a credible theory of the Southern District prosecutor saying, we don't want it to get too confusing. We don't want the jurors to go back and be like, oh my God, Bill Clinton and Kevin Spacey and Ehud Barak, and you know what I mean? We want to keep it like this is as simple as a trafficking case on Long Island. You have an insatiable, terrible, avaricious guy and a woman who becomes the madame to try to either remain the girlfriend or, and what makes this case different is that, as many people think, he's probably collecting information on the people that he's procuring for, right? And why is he doing that? Who's he doing that for? I have to say, sadly, I'm going to conclude it's not going to come out in this trial. This trial is coming to a close. I was surprised. It was supposed to go till mid-January. And yesterday they announced they were going to close this week. Now, because of this sickness, maybe it won't happen, but there may be a verdict one way or another before the end of the year.
And by the way, I do also, not to play devil's advocate as well, but sure. I understand the rationale of why there's no other named defendant. This is not a question about going after other parties who are not defendants to the suit. So irrelevant for the purposes of prosecuting Ghislaine Maxwell. But then maybe not so irrelevant to censoring or redacting evidence that in an ordinary case would not be redacted, but for specific reasons, protecting minors or victims.
Totally. No, and I want to go, but here's the other. I think here's the better. If it's viewed as a case, all we're doing is prosecuting Ghislaine Maxwell, then it may make sense to keep out this much wider world. Of course, a different prosecutor, and I think the current one, they've just switched from, they had Berman, then they had Strauss, now they have a guy called Damian Williams. So it's really hard to know when the decision was made.
All these names you're allowed to mention, correct?
These are not victims. I mean, they're victims of their own ambition, but they're no. These are the official. Their photos are up over there, and they're good. I just asked. I'm actually kind of proud of it. Because the one thing about covering the courthouse at the UN, I used to be able to every day go to the briefing room and ask questions they didn't like and kind of snark and look, until they grabbed me and threw me out. Here, you kind of cover things. It's a different kind of journalism, but they did have a press conference in the middle of this trial where Damian Williams, the new Biden-appointed U.S. attorney, announced an investigation of the police department of a New York suburb called Mount Vernon. And he was very proud, and the journalists were like, "This is great. Is this a symbol of the Biden administration's commitment on civil rights? Like, what's he going to say? No." So he says yes. Then I said, "Wait a second. If you're now saying that this police department in the Southern District has been corruptly manufacturing evidence, are you going to reopen your own convictions of people you gained with that information? So, well, that's a question for another day, which I'm sure it will be. But what they should do or could do with Ghislaine Maxwell is to say to her, look, if you lose, you're going to jail for the rest of your life. You've got the keys. What do you have? Let's have a proffer session. What's the biggest name you can tie to sex with a 14-year-old? And then go from there, because that's how a prosecutor is supposed to operate. They didn't do it in the financial crisis, right? They just went after a few low-level guys. But in most cases, look at El Chapo, look at all these other cases. They catch the driver. They say, we can jail you for life for a pickup truck full of cocaine, or you can flip on El Chapo. And they say, I'm flipping on El Chapo. No problem. So she probably could do that. They haven't offered, I believe. I don't think it's that she's like, omerta. She's not going to talk. I think she would be very, I think she probably feels she's been she seems to genuinely believe that it was her right. It seems to me that I've heard her talk, or at least I've read. So, and I've read some dramatic readings of it when she was deposed in this Virginia Roberts Giuffre case. Like, she's getting sued in a civil case. She was so dismissive. She said, "These girls," kind of like she probably feels if they took $300 for it. What's the problem? Honestly, I mean, it seems to me I can't. The jury will decide whether they believe this or not. I think it's incontrovertible that and maybe people. I love this, the nitty gritty of it all. The first chink in the armor here was sometime in the 90s in Florida, when a 14-year-old girl was in a public school and got into a fight, and 3 $100 bills fell out of her pocket, and people said, "Where'd you get the money?" She said nothing. Then she tried to say drugs, but it wasn't credible. This is what they were paying at Casa Epstein in Palm Beach for sexualized massages with girls as young as they could get them. And they were paying in $100 bills. And there's been testimony, which could be the most damning, of Ghislaine Maxwell being the one to hand over the $300. And also, after a particular session, which I won't describe on these airwaves, saying, "How did it go? How did you like it?" This is pretty clear. If this is true and this is believed, she's guilty.
And this is a session not with Epstein, correct? This is a session with another, or a session with Epstein?
That was a session with Epstein. Most of what's been testified is a session with Epstein. There was one session where she was himself with. That's why they structured it this way. You could definitely probably find some even more like, Caligula, like flying over Africa with you can only imagine what's going on with this.
Well, I don't like can imagine. Yeah. I've seen pictures which can give me a good baseline.
Andrew, so that's the funny thing. There's been a little bit of titillation here. Like the two Epstein pilots have both testified, and ironically, they were government witnesses. But these guys were pretty pro Epstein. I mean, because they did it for years. What are they going to say? I turned a blind eye to like these terrible acts. So both of them said, I never saw anything. But they were willing to testify where basically they were called by the government to authenticate and to confirm that the named victims in this case were actually flown by Epstein and Maxwell from Palm Beach to Traverse City, Michigan, from Palm Beach to Santa Fe, New Mexico. But both of them had their children's tuition paid by Epstein, right? So in a way, they're conflicted. It's kind of a weird. Some of the witnesses here are just here to say yes. But I want to go back. Here's what you'd said, because the secrecy has been, this is what's animated me throughout the process. For example, the flight logs. Many people have seen them. I think Gawker was the first one to get them. Some of the flight logs have been published. I'm not sure all of them. The second pilot that testified here is a guy called Rogers. And I'm sure that real experts in this case are probably, maybe it's all public. But then if it's public, why is it being redacted in this case? Why is the public version of the flight log entirely blacked out as to who was on the plane? Like, who are you? If you're saying that they weren't engaged in any wrongdoing, then unredacted. But better said, if it's otherwise publicly available, what's the basis for just redacting everything? And she can't explain that. And so I've done now 3 filings to Judge Nathan. She docketed the second, and the third one I only did today. And the filings go as follows. And the filings say there's way too much secrecy in this case. You need to the allowing the parties themselves to decide what to black out is madness. You should set up a process to hear from the press and public what should be and also the judge shouldn't set herself up as the arbiter. It often isn't done that way. As like, if she decides it's secret, it's fine. She should hear from people pushing full transparency, and then from those seeking secrecy, and then she, as the umpire, should make a decision. The umpire can't be a player. This is my idea of the law. The umpire hears from two sides, and right now ironically, the government and the defense both want things secret for different reasons, I'm sure. The And so you need to hear from the public. So I put in these letters. I also advocated for it and didn't get a call-in line, so that I think the case would be getting a lot more coverage if, okay, cameras are not, there's no cameras in the federal court system, although there have been some Zoom hearings during COVID. But throughout the federal court system, since March 2020, there have been call-in lines. I've started covering cases in DC, San Jose, California, because people weren't able to go into the courtroom or safely, because they wanted to say the courts are open to the public as they should be, even if, we only allow one person in the courtroom, or if we're going to have everything by phone. The defendants can be by phone, but even if the defendants are in person, we're going to have a phone line. We're just going to open it up and put it on speakerphone and, go via con Dios. It would have been so good here. And she should have done it. I've asked today that she now revisit the decision and do it in light of some Omicron. There's the new strain. Do it.
Oh, no, don't give anyone any ideas as to how to fortify the Omicron. But so Matthew, I immediately have certain reflexes. I took your interest in this particular case to be reflective of something going back to your childhood. But no, this is just as a result of your involvement in the UN, that you've seen Ghislaine Maxwell and the Epsteins involved in international issues. It's been the worst kept secret that everyone has known about forever. Mm-hmm. Bring it all the way back for 1 second, just so that people can know. How did Epstein get the sweetheart deal that he got in Florida in 2008? Was it 2008?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a simple answer. I mean, I think that he had so much money that he obviously was a very powerful person in Florida. He could, I think, for example, even with Clinton, it may not be as complicated as people make it out. If you're Bill Clinton and you want to have, a Clinton Foundation and have a lot of money and be a big wheel, sometimes you need a Boeing 727, and it's not cheap. And if there's some guy that's like, hey, I stole all of, Les Wexner's money, I've got a plane, I'll fly you for 7 days. And you like Kevin Spacey, we'll put him on the plane. You like young masseuses, I got him in spades. Let's go, bro, let's roll. So I'm assuming the same way that he became a friend of Bill Clinton, that then Bill Clinton later said, oh, I don't really know him that well. And then he's on the White House logs, that with politicians of the day in Florida. Now, the more sinister explanation is that throughout all of this, he's always had compromising information on those who could screw him. Like, these people went to the parties and had photos taken, and therefore were like, can we work this out? Why don't you just check in over the weekend to a jail for 6 months, and then we'll give you make you bulletproof for life. You can just keep on doing it. So this was really nasty. And but you're right. It's part of a larger, this kind of abuse, and I see it. I think other people see it. It's not. They asked jurors in this case as part of the jury selection process. Do you discriminate against people that are very affluent or have a luxurious lifestyle? And they knocked people out that said yes, which I thought was kind of weird. Like, isn't that like? I don't know. It just seemed like a strange jury question to get.
Well, I think there's only two ways to answer that question: honestly or by lying. Which would result in the wrong ways of dismissing jurors.
I know it seemed like a crazy question to me, but it's troublesome to me too. Even Judge Nathan, I feel like Maxwell, because I cover a lot of cases here. I've covered other sex trafficking cases here. That Maxwell's been given too much leeway. Maybe it's because they want a conviction if it comes to stick. But normally in a case, most judges here would say you get one final pretrial conference. The trial's on a date X, and you can do one round of motions trying to knock stuff out. And we're going to give you here, this had like 8 of them. It came to take over the courthouse. Like, anytime they had a thought, they could put in a filing. And most judges here would have just laid down the line and said, I'm not answering it anymore. The deadline is passed, screw you. But here it's like, oh no, And so I think obviously a defendant that has money is going to have more lawyers and raise more issues. It's a shame. And the federal defenders are good lawyers. It's just a matter of resources. But the judge should treat these cases the same. And I feel that, and I'll give you an example. Right now in the district of this is a kind of a right-wing comparison. The trials, the proceedings leading to trial of the Capitol breach January 6th defendants down in DC. I'm covering a lot of them. They're all available by phone. Like, there is and the judges are using those phone lines to promote themselves as defenders of democracy in the middle of a nothing guilty plea. Some lady came from like rural Pennsylvania wearing a Trump hat, and like next thing she knew, she was in the Capitol going, woo-hoo, we're taking over. She's getting prosecuted. And the judge is like, you made us look bad overseas. I think you've got to do jail time. Oh, we have the appearance of the actual dog of the vlog. But so, if those cases are going to be made available to people all over the world, I don't understand why this one is being kept under wraps.
And someone in the chat said, get Barnes on. I realized this happened on such short notice. I just sent Barnes the StreamYard link.
The link? Okay, good.
Yeah, if you can't get in though, Matthew, you're coming back, and we're doing this again with Barnes.
Okay, no, definitely. I like your formats. I need to learn about it because I just do sort of informal, handheld.
I'll give you whatever tricks I know. They're nothing. Sure. It's just trial and error over 5 years. But this is one question I want to know the answer to. I want to ask it before I forget it. A few days ago, Bill Bradley, I know that guy. He's the guy from the Trivago commercials. I don't know if that's actually your picture, Bill, but right. You look like him. A few days ago, we learned that Trump was on the plane several times, not just a free ride to New York.
This has become, I'll tell you, I've gotten a lot of and I'm not, I would say this, of the people they sort of have name checked in asking the pilots, it seems that Trump's name has come up more like, and then I hear from Trump supporters saying he only did it once. It was a simple flight to Teterboro.
Yeah,
he never went to the island.
And if it's not true, I want to know. If it's not true, I want to know. As well.
In the trial, nothing has come out about him getting serviced on the plane. And it's just come up that he was on a certain flight from Florida to New York. And that kind of makes sense. And it's like, I've heard, so it doesn't, then some people try to say, well, Maureen Comey, she's bringing it up on purpose. I don't know. I think maybe these pilots, like, that's a big profile. That's a high profile.
Yeah, they're definitely
Perlman came up. That was a highly disappointing one. Here's another great one. Yes, was on the plane of Epstein going to Traverse City, Michigan, to a music school known as Interlochen in northern Michigan. So people were like, it's like Perlman. But maybe he was just taking a free flight. It's not like all of these flights had, but he was there.
I know people who went to Interlochen. I had no idea it had any such connection. And now I'm somewhat
There's a Jeffrey Epstein cabin. It's been recently renamed. There was a cabin named for him.
Down.
No, it's really true. Because he used his way of grooming, or conditioning.
Don't worry. We're done.
His way of conditioning girls was to say, "What's your dream? You want to be a singer? We're going to take you to the summer camp in Interlaken." And he would fly them on. I'm sure the other people were like, driving with sandwiches in a cooler. But these girls that he's trying to condition are being flown in with Itzhak Perlman and staying in the Jeffrey Epstein lodge. And they did it. I think that's shameful. That school has a lot to answer for. I think there's a foundation right across from the United Nations called the International Peace Institute. It's a highly respected entity that took all kinds of money from Epstein, even after the non-prosecution agreement, to open an office in Bahrain. I reported on that first, and the head guy had to end up quitting, but it's still going on. No one has answered. The head guy of IPI is the husband of the ambassador of Norway to the UN, and she has never answered what did she know and when did she own it. And yet, within the UN, they have events about stopping violence against women and 16 days for gender equality. When it's like, wait a second, you're taking money from a known pedophile. It's absolutely insane. And he was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Like, it was never, these ground balls were never run out to find out. Obviously, there's the Bill Gates connection. There's a lot of this thing.
The Bill Gates one is not the most surprising, but rather it's probably the most damning because it's not an incidental. But this is why, and Matthew, I say this with respect, I don't trust anybody anywhere in the world. It's taken me a long time to trust my wife and kids, and even the dogs. I'm still 50-50 with. But this is you realize the harder people push for. Public benevolence. It's the virtue signaling, but it's what virtue signaling was before Twitter. Now it's been diluted to a tweet here and there, and you can know who was the guy that just tweeted something out today. Oh yeah, calling Rittenhouse the worst dude ever from KFC Barstool. Sure enough, the guy calling Rittenhouse the worst guy ever cheated on his wife when she was pregnant. So that's the virtue signaling of the modern era. But back in the day, it's whoever donated $1 million to a charity, when you knew what was going on behind the scenes, you knew what was going on behind the scenes. And this is just bringing it all to light. Oh man. Okay. So,
I'm going to tell you, this is an obscure, it's such a, I'm a fan of podcasts. So before I got totally sucked into Epstein world and Maxwell world, I guess, for the last 3 weeks. I listened to one about some cult leader from the 80s I'd never heard of. But the irony is he was late. He was running a group, and maybe he was a cult leader, maybe he wasn't. But he ended up getting discredited, and some followers died. And he had given a lot of money to the Audubon Society, or promised to give it. And rather than step back from it, they actually sued to get it. They said he had tried to distribute his money elsewhere, and they said, no, that's our money. And in order to get it, even after the guy had been discredited, they named some kind of valley in Connecticut for the guy. So it's really like the nonprofit world is like anything for a buck. But Epstein is perhaps the best example of somebody that just he knew. I heard last night, because I'm trying to become fully immersed beyond just the trial testimony. One of the survivor victims, called Shante Davis, very heartbreakingly says, not in this trial, but as a course of some other, there's a whole bunch of ancillary projects, that when she told Epstein she was not going to go for the massages anymore because he'd attacked her younger sister, Epstein said to him, you're going to find that you're not going to get anywhere without me. And she said initially it made her really angry, and she was like, I'm going to show you. And then, like, you hear in her voice, it, like, the years went on, and like she became sort of thought of as a prostitute, she said, because she was outed by these documents, and like her life never worked the way it should have. And it's this terrible, someone like Epstein understands that, like, as they say in Spanish, para la plata baila el perro, for silver the dog will dance. Like, those $300 to the 14-year-old girl is everything. And that, Interlochen scholarship to somebody that's dreaming of being a dancer is everything. And that $2 million to open up an office in Bahrain to some sleazy nonprofit that wants to say that they're making Middle East peace is everything. And you can just, it's really terrible, honestly.
It makes me angry in a way that's guttural, and it's like best not to focus on it. But so if we start from the beginning of the trial, so Epstein got his sweetheart deal, and then he got re-indicted. Or, I mean, how did the shit hit the fan?
Somebody decided, and I want to give credit actually to he's now two former SDNY U.S. attorneys away. I think it was under Jeffrey Berman. They decided. Many people were, there was more and more anger growing. There were documentaries made, and totally surprising, at least to me. I remember this was already 2019, so I was already out of the UN and covering this courthouse every day. Suddenly, out of the blue, he flew back in. He probably thought it was just another flight from Paris to Teterboro, private jet, and he was arrested. They arrested him, and they found they came up with a legal theory to work around, to create a different time frame, and he was locked up. And I started hearing even then, because I know a lot of the defense lawyers here, not of cases like this, but of like the regular kind of crack cases. I'm still very interested in the Bronx and whatnot. They said it was incredible that in the jail, the MCC jail, Epstein was being given basically a room all day to meet with his lawyers. But the lawyers didn't even have to be there. He didn't want the lawyers in. He had a laptop and was probably like watching porn. Like everyone else is like in their cell waiting for like 2 hours a week with the lawyers. And this guy is like in a room with the basically like with his finger pushed down on the soda and snack machine, just pouring the stuff out. And they did it for him. Probably they called it protective custody, but not protective enough because he ended up dead. And there's a whole bunch of theories of, did he kill himself? Was he killed?
Well,
I mean, it seems like
Matthew,
I'm not even going there. I'm not even going there. That seems to have then set the wheels in motion. And I think that's Ghislaine Maxwell's defense here, is basically because he died, because of this sort of like prosecution interruptus and all the energy and anger, it became important to get somebody. And she just happens to be the person. Now, in another view, she was really the puppet master. She was a co-equal. She was,
This is just, I put it out in the vlog on Monday night, but the real questions here: how does Epstein, no university degree, as if that really matters, but no university degree, teaching at university, becomes a multi-millionaire? I don't know if he was a billionaire, whatever, with influence when he had no connections,
right? He obviously is something. He obviously had some kind of drive or like will to power or whatever. Go ahead.
Or the flip side is that it's Ghislaine Maxwell comes in and says, "Okay, we see this guy from New York. He has some connections. We'll build him up, and then we'll use him."
No, I think so. That's true. But I think by the time they got together, he was already taking Les Wexner's money. Money was not a problem. He didn't need any money from her. He may have needed the Rolodex to get like other connections. But in fact, some people try to say at the time that Ghislaine Maxwell met him, I don't like to get, this is the sort of soap opera aspect of the case, but I mean, I've become interested in it. She, because of her father, Robert Maxwell's flame out and stealing of the pensions of his companies,
440 million pounds.
Yeah,
he
she
died.
didn't have a lot of money. So basically, it's a marriage of it was not a marriage, but it's a partnership of convenience. Epstein with ill-gotten money. He already had a jet. He may not have had the Boeing 747. My understanding of the timeline, and it is still an extraordinary thing. It's not, you have to give him, I mean, in just a kind of a raw kind of he grew up in Coney Island. He was not really particularly impressive one way or another. Somehow he became a teacher at a very prestigious, not a college, but a high school in New York.
Was it
Dalton school? Very, without having a college degree. How he got that, nobody knows. And my understanding is it was there. One, that he started going after the students. And I mean, he's had this aspect to him for some time. But he met a guy, Ace Greenberg of Bear Stearns, who had a whole theory of like, he wanted young and hungry traders. He didn't care if you had a college degree. And Epstein may have shown like, I'm vicious, I'm ready, and probably oversold himself as a mathematician. He got a job there. Something went wrong. He left. He went to a place called Towers Financial, which was a kind of a Bernie Madoff operation. Like these guys would, it was during the boom time of leveraged buyouts and raiders. They bought 2 Illinois insurance companies just for the cash and used it to try to buy Pan Am. And when that fell apart, they just kept selling bonds. The guy that was his partner and boss at Towers Financial served 20 years for financial fraud. But Epstein, Zelig-like, left just in time, never had to pay restitution. And somehow, and this is the other mystery, somehow he became, through some way, he was introduced to Les Wexner, the founder and moving force behind all of these women's clothing brands with a mansion in Columbus, Ohio. He became his lone financial advisor.
Who was Lex Wexner?
Wexner. He's probably a top 10 or 20 U.S. Titan. He was my understanding. I've been digging into this. He was the son of a relatively small, I don't know if it's a women's clothing company in Ohio, and he built it up. He made it big. It's like, who are the Walmarts? The Walmarts were guys that used to sell like watermelons out of the back of a truck, and he built it up, and suddenly he understood this idea of branding. It went from like a regional Ohio clothing company with mills to a thing like, we're Victoria's Secret. We sell dreams, and we're going to have stores in Dubai, and we're going to be in the airport in Hong Kong, and we're going to have. And then Jeffrey Epstein's like, whoa! Once he became Les Wexner's financial advisor, and not just advisor, but administrator. He was given the keys to all the accounts. Basically, it seems to me, unless it really is true that he sold weapons, and I mean, I would love to, he just stole money from Wexner. That Wexner gave him all the accounts, had so much money he didn't notice when hundreds of millions of dollars were being siphoned off into Epstein accounts. Epstein started buying properties. Wexner at some point realized how much money was stolen, probably was told of the sexual abuse, and instead of going to the police, just said, I was fooled, told his shareholders, it's a mistake, it won't happen again, and tried to put it behind him. They're trying to depose him in this private case of Dershowitz and Virginia Giuffre. He's facing deposition. So that's another way some truth may come out of this morass.
Yeah, this is that's one heck of a deep rabbit hole detour.
Yeah.
And interesting nonetheless. Let's fast forward ahead to Ghislaine Maxwell.
Absolutely.
So Epstein gets his sweetheart deal in 2018, 2016. Yep. Turned about face, gets prosecuted.
2019, actually, is even more recent than that. 2019, he was arrested, and he spent less than a year. It was in pretrial detention, and then he was dead. And then about almost a year after that, slightly less than a year, the next summer of 2020, I remember because I think COVID was already here, so it was like a big deal. They were like, come to the press conference, but wear a mask, and this was before vaccination cards. It was like they where only so many can get in. They arrested her. She claims that during this whole time, she had stayed in touch with the prosecutor. She said, if you ever want to arrest me, if you ever want to question me, I don't think so, because I was there, and they said basically she was hiding in New Hampshire. We got her. Anyway, she became the replacement figure, and she's been in jail since the summer of 2020. So now almost 18 months she's been in the MDC in Brooklyn.
And the funny thing is, like, Robert Barnes and I have been talking
Sure.
about this for the last 18 months. I remember being in
Yeah.
my mother-in-law's sunroom in the townships doing a live stream on a Sunday night,
Yeah.
when the world was different.
Mhm.
And I had no idea about Ghislaine Maxwell's,
Yeah.
her family history. I had no idea about her father's ties to intelligence, Mossad, MI6,
Yeah.
KGB, whatever.
Totally.
So this is like, my mind is being opened to the actual reality of the world in which we live. But she gets arrested. She gets indicted. The indictment is participation in trafficking, all the other stuff, lying in a former lawsuit back in 2016 or whenever.
Which has been severed off. She'll be,
Yeah,
even if she's acquitted in this one, she's facing other charges. So
yeah, well,
screwed.
She's not being acquitted in this. I mean, that's my bottom line is she won't be acquitted. The only question is the conviction going to be the cover-up conviction? But that's a separate issue.
Right.
So the trial itself now, first of all, I just want to know one thing. To get into the courthouse, tell us, for people who have no idea, what this is like from day one on a daily basis, just to get in to do what you're doing.
Sure, exactly. And I'm going to, in the same way that I'm going to leave a few things a little bit blurry in the interest of what I told you, of trying not to. At the UN, I would say exactly how I'm not doing anything. Let me put it that way. I'm not doing anything.
I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to get in trouble.
No,
I want to know what
exactly. I'm just saying, because I've had a lot of. It's an ongoing struggle here to be able to cover court cases live. I think it's a great thing. I think people really like it. I got a letter today from somebody who had investigated Epstein all the way back into like the early 2000s, who said he's learning everything from these live tweets, because you're not going to get, so, but I've been in courtrooms here where judges have said, like, no, you're using your phone, Mr. Lee, get out. And they really, like, literally had, it's tricky. The first day was a huge, I think what Judge Nathan has done is to try to, I think this may be more useful, or this is more what I want to say. It's not a conspiracy to say this case could have been more public. And it's really important to explain how this works, because I've seen, particularly professional journalists, professional journalists are often very, and I guess I am one, but I'm also something else, because they seem to say, they don't understand. Of course, there's no cameras in the federal courthouse. So why are they saying, Rittenhouse was a state case, so there were cameras. This is a federal case. There's no cameras. It's a pure conspiracy theory. There's also a theory under which I ask for a call-in line so that anyone in the world could dial 1-800-Ghislaine and listen to the trial. Now, some professional journalists, with all due respect, would say, it's better for us that we have this exclusive access. Like, this is what makes our 600-word story at the end of the day worth something. If every Yahoo is listening to it, what the hell do we have? But I'm on the side of the Yahoos, in the same way I'm on the side of the guys in the vacant lots selling Cuchifritos. I feel, not Yahoos. I believe that people should know more about the law. I think that conspiracy theories grow because people don't have that. Now, maybe some people will see the actual information and still have whatever beliefs they have, but I think it's more likely that people will say, oh my God, this judge is like blatantly on this. You got to hear it. And I think that these are public proceedings. There's a reason that the Constitution says that a defendant, it's not just a defendant's right to a public trial. It's the public's right to know how its money is being spent by the prosecutors, how decisions are being made to give sweetheart deals or not, or to limit the scope. I mean, I'm going to give you a perfect example on this. Right now, the witness lists are not public. The government turned in a witness list. It gave it to the defense. It put it into the court. But the court has agreed it shouldn't be public because it's not a judicial document. The case law says only documents that are directed to a court asking for action should be made public. But why not?
I'll call bullshit on that, because when you file your joint declaration, typically you do list your witnesses and it's known. And unless there's a witness who's underage or needs protection for whatever the reason, your witness list, joint declaration, but it's civil, it's Canada, so maybe I don't know.
No, exactly. And there are different judges come from different places. This could, in this case, I put in my letter today to her. I think it should be done. And the reason I think it should be done is that it's not just a matter even of the rights of the public to know what she as Allison Nathan. Basically, the idea is that you want to know what information the judge got to understand how they decided. But in this case, I think people want to know, and I know I want to know, how did the prosecution decide how to do this case? Why did they decide to have only four survivor or victim witnesses? This is a big question to me. And I think you said it's impossible that she'll be acquitted. I do want to say to you, nothing is impossible.
Well,
I covered a case recently of of a guard in the jail here, right next to the courthouse, that extorted a woman who was bringing in drugs to her boyfriend in jail and said, "I'm going to turn you in if you don't have sex with me." And it was all proved, and he was acquitted. He was acquitted because the way that they proved it, and the people didn't think that the woman was very like the defense is not. I'm not a pro-defense guy, as you may have figured out from all this. I'm not, but I'm not in a dream world. Like these lawyers are doing. They are systematically. If you have only 4 witnesses, and their approach to every single one of them is that they're a bunch of gold diggers. This is not me saying it. This is their defense. Their defense is that these people lined up at the trough of the Epstein compensation fund. They got somewhere between 5 million, 3 million, 1 million. That part of the agreement, I don't know if they can prove this, but the jury has heard that part of the deal for getting that money was to work with the government to get to the bottom of all things Epstein. Or they believe that if she's convicted, they can go after her. And they keep trying to say, well, we're not going to go after her. We're not and so all it takes is one. You need a unanimous to be guilty. All 12 people have to say every element of this case has been proved beyond a reasonable doubt. And all you need is one person to say, like, maybe there's other victims that are more credible. But I personally do believe these victims. I believe, I'll give you an example. The third of the 4, we haven't heard the 4th yet, but the third of the 4, and this is her real name, but without a last name, is known as Caroline. And I think this is important because a lot of everything that we discussed has been kind of pie in the sky. She was a 14-year-old girl that was told by Virginia Roberts that she could make $300 giving a massage. Her mother was an alcoholic. I'm not making excuses for it. This is her story. She was driven there by her boyfriend, Sean, who's also testified in the trial, Shawn. Sean stayed outside the Epstein house in the car for an hour. Like, what was he thinking? Basically, why isn't he on trial? I mean, he's not a big name, but it feels like pimping when you drive your girlfriend to a mansion and stay outside in the car and then take part of the money when it comes out. It's not a very pretty thing to be done, but she did it. Now, the thing is, to me, it was very credible the way she testified, and it was heartbreaking. Now, once she's finished, the government, the defense says, well, didn't you later work for an escort service? Didn't you later get arrested for selling an Xbox to a pawn shop in Georgia? Didn't you, now to me, it's like, yeah, because her life was ruined. She was shattered and destroyed by this sleaze fest. And, what are you going to do?
And I'm not a criminal lawyer. I don't know the procedure of the state, but to me, it's like, okay, well, post event stuff may be less relevant for the reasons you've mentioned.
It goes to credibility. Whenever you're a witness, she's not the defendant. That's the difference. There are a lot of very strong rules, and I'm sure but here
about proof of character,
about putting in like this guy did another robbery, or people don't like him. This is totally off limits. But when you have a witness, these guys are not the defendants. These are the witnesses coming against Ghislaine Maxwell. Anyone that comes to make a criminal complaint on the record is going to be grilled at great length about their credibility. And if you've been arrested, it's going to come up. If you've previously given false testimony, it's definitely going to come up. And so what they say to them, and I think it's important that just like in the Rittenhouse case, so people understand if it does go this way, why it goes this way. The defense's theory, and I didn't know I was going to take this route. And I'm sure people might think I'm pro-defense. I'm just telling you what's actually happening in the trial. They say to them, when you were interviewed by the FBI in 2019 and 2016, you never mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell. You mentioned Jeffrey Epstein. You mentioned another helper called Sarah Kellen. You didn't say beans about her until the prosecutors, after the death of Epstein, came back to you and said, hey, what about Ghislaine Maxwell? One of them sued Epstein and Sarah Kellen for money, never sued Ghislaine Maxwell. So her theory is I was a peripheral player. I wasn't there. Now, some witnesses are saying you were in the room. You fondled my part.
No, and look, I didn't go into detail, but I elaborated or at least set it out in my summary of the first week and a half. It's like, yeah, the argument is going to be, was Ghislaine Maxwell a pawn, the ringleader, or co-conspirator? And now she's going to say, sure, none of these people mentioned me 10 years ago. It was all the man who is no longer here because he did his own name to himself. And then the question is going to be for the jury to determine, like, who is the player in this scheme? If it's the deceased, okay, convict him again, he's dead. And if it's her, then so yeah, I didn't mean to suggest this was as much of a slam dunk as Justice Smollett.
It could have been. Here's the thing, I'm sure I'm less worried about attacking the prosecutors. I think I have to say this. I mean, again, they have a very high batting average here. They convict well over
80 plus percent.
No, over 90. I mean, this prison guard that got off was unheard of. So they just convicted Les Parnas for, they win, so they must know. But I would say personally, it seems like they went with too few victims. Like, if you're saying this is a global conspiracy, and you know that they're going to knock some guy, like, you got to come with more, because you're taking a big chance. You're taking a chance, and I think the real thing, it's not you put. I want to think of a fourth category, because kingpin, or you say them again. It's just that she may have been sleazy. She may be but was she just a peripheral player? How big a role did she have?
Yeah, but and Matt, first of all, do people call you Matt, or am I really overstepping?
You can. Okay. That's fine.
And people are going to say, well, if they bring in more witnesses of Matthew, then they bring in a greater exposure to show the international scale of this enterprise.
Exactly. No, I agree. I think, not as a journalist, I would love to have more scale, but I also think, I mean, I think it is interesting. I mean, I think I don't go as far as some people saying that they're just trying to cover it up, but I think they've made decisions that give rise. They should now err on the side of transparency, because it's not just wackos that say this case is a cover-up. They're not. I'm saying it. I'm going to say it. Call me a wacko. I'm going to say not that it's a cover-up, that for reasons that may not have to do with the desire to cover up, for just kind of pinhead reasons of, like, we don't want her to win on appeal, and it's more convenient to not have second thoughts. And I mean, judges don't want to call in line because you're less accountable. When you're just operating with a home crowd, you know what I mean? You don't want people saying, like, whoa, I heard it, it's terrible.
I'll tell you why. The less conspiratorial reason, maybe it's not because you don't want to disclose the international conspiracy theory. Maybe it's because you don't want to expose the incompetence of law enforcement for the last 20 years. I mean, maybe that's the only thing. Maybe it's not to protect Prince Andrew. It's to protect the SDNY and whomever else, Florida PD and whatever.
Right. Absolutely. That could definitely. I mean, I think that and it's just, I can see why in little ways it made sense. I mean, just even specifically, and I want to go back because I think some people don't. It's not just of tilting at windmills. They could easily have had a call in line for this trial, and in the run up to the trial. In fact, if you go back and look, some people are still writing to me. So what are you complaining about? There's a call in line. Virtually every proceeding in the case, until the trial.
I called it in. I called that number for multiple times the first day.
There was a call in line. What happened is that, and I know the people involved, so I want to be and they're good people. Right before the trial, a memo went out, not just about this case, but system-wide, saying henceforth, any in-person criminal proceeding, there's going to be no call in line because it would violate federal law. Number one, it can't be true because the District of Columbia, which last I checked is part of the federal system, has a call in line for every single criminal case, even when the defendant is so there was a waiver done. There is generally a prohibition against court cameras, Zoom cameras and others in federal court. And then because of COVID, there was something called the CARES Act passed, which said you can do things by phone. You can do arraignments. You can do sentencings. You can do all of these things. And so some districts like this one have decided COVID is over. They basically decided it's time to go back to the old ways. They made a mistake because, and this is the thing about, they made a mistake because right after they did this, this has been my kind of cynical, very specific argument. There was the trip to Africa of Bill Clinton, Epstein, Kevin Spacey, the masseuses, and now people can't fly to the trial from South Africa. If you're a journalist from South Africa, you can't come.
Let me stop you there because I do want to get into this. I just want to make sure none of the names you're mentioning on this trip to Africa are.
No. So these are the perpetrators. These are the perps.
What is the trip to Africa?
Okay, I'm going back to this because I think I'm actually writing something about this, and this is becoming my
Where Matthew, where are you writing this? Is it going to be on Intercity?
Currently, it is on InterCityPress.com, but it's soon going to be. It may be in book format as a certain tome I wrote called "Belt and Roadkill" about the United Nations, which is about their sellout to China. And the idea behind it is this. It was the perfect. It says everything of sort of the hoopla of kind of glitzy pseudo-humanitarian pedophiles flying to darkest Africa as if they were helping it, and to come. This was a known thing. Basically, the Clinton Foundation said Bill Clinton wanted to go on a 7-day tour of Africa, to a whirlwind tour from Lagos to Johannesburg, and it costs money. And Epstein said, "Hey, I'm ready. I've got a plane. I've got some broads. Let's do it. Let's do this thing. Road trip, And so they went. And the interesting thing about it is that this was actually probably the worst decision Epstein ever made, because in the 90s, all of this flight was in 2002. Until then, there was almost nothing written about it. He was doing these things, but he was just like the eccentric billionaire with the schoolgirls, at the gate. And then suddenly people were saying, who is this guy with the plane and Bill Clinton? Who is this guy? And so people wrote so one of them, there's a journalist that's getting trashed here, wrote a very fawning profile about the brilliant Mr. Epstein or whatever, but people started looking at him. And the moment you look at him, you say, where did all the money come from? How does this guy have the biggest house in Manhattan? How does he have an island in the Caribbean? How does he say he's a financial advisor when he has only one customer? The question you really wanted, it seems to me, unless Les Wexner is just entirely stupid, probably this is the first guy he has compromising information on. Because why would you give the keys to your bank account to this guy, to anybody, even to your Goldman Sachs personal financial banker? You wouldn't do it. So why this guy? Well, maybe because one night, boozed up in the mansion, they filmed you doing something, and then you say, well, you're a smart guy, go ahead and run it, and then all the money is gone. But so that flight was a big one, and so now to come full circle, my argument is you can't. It all comes down to this: there have to be public trials. So during COVID, when they had special rules for getting into the courthouse and special rules. It used to be the elevators here, you could only have 3 in an elevator. Now it's 6. Clearly things have been getting better, but they just decided during COVID, they said the courts have to be accessible. We're going to have call-in lines. I covered one of these trials in Boston of what's called varsity blues, the people that paid bribes to get their kids into school with fake pictures of sports. The whole trial was by Zoom. It was amazing. It was you take a screen, cut it into 4. You got the witness, the judge, the lawyer.
Oh, dude, we saw the lawyer Cat did that, and then we saw a good example where they.
Yeah, exactly. So and then somehow this district decided, and what I can't tell, and I'm too close to it here. I'm not the one. Somebody has to come in from outside and do this. But was the decision to eliminate call-in lines tied particularly to the Maxwell case, or was it just in retrospect it was the wrong time because it's not over? And days after it was announced, New York and the United States imposed travel bans on people from particular countries, including those visited by this Lolita Express whirlwind tour. So my theory of getting the call-in line restored, which may or may not work, is not just like, hey, let the Yahoos here. They're bothering. People are asking me too many questions on Twitter. It's that you can't say it's public and accessible when there's a group of people, possibly victims, that are legally, technically, objectively, absolutely banned from coming. They cannot come, even if they had the money, even if they wanted to come, even if they would line up at 5 a.m, they're unable to. So what does it cost you to have a call-in line like you do in the Steve Bannon case, like you do in the January 6th case, like you do in nothing cases? Why not this one? And that's my question.
Okay, I'm going to bring this on up just to illustrate. I'm not visibly stressed out. I'm always stressed out. I just want you to know that, Del Braintree.
I feel like,
and then this, and we got Dershowitz too. So I have had Dershowitz on the channel. Sure. It's at least twice. I think it's twice. He gave his explanation as to how he, his incident with whatever, Maxwell, and you can choose to believe it or not believe it. Right. Yeah, you can believe it or not believe it. I look, hours with Dershowitz. I believe it. Sure. But it's not because I like anything about Dershowitz as an individual. Right. I don't know him, or politically, because politically, whatever. Okay, so the trial starts now. Okay, so you have prosecution going after Ghislaine. The bottom line are trafficking charges, perjury. Nobody cares about the perjury. Right. You've got 4 witnesses. You can't name the witnesses. Mm-hmm. This is my question. This is my $1 million question of the night. You can't name the witnesses, yet the defense seems to be flubbing up the names of the witnesses in real time. Do you think that's an intimidation tactic, a genuine mistake, or other effery afoot for whatever the reason?
Yeah, I mean, I think it wouldn't. It's like sports. Like you get away with what the referee lets you get away with, right? I think it's happened enough times that I think and there's some people that, as I'm sure Dershowitz would say, they don't think that people look. So yes, I think that there's some intentionality involved in it. I don't know if you can prove it, but I don't think that the full force of warnings have been deployed. In fact, there was one. He said the witness's last name. No, people didn't realize that he said it really quickly. It wasn't just what he first got admonished for was giving the name of a sibling of one of there have been three witnesses. Two have used names not their own. There's been Jane and Kate. These are not their names.
Yeah.
You can figure out. I know who, for example, Jane, it's absolutely clear who it is, but that's fine. I'm not reporting that. The one is Caroline, which is her real first name, but they're not using her last name. Now, I believe today I've learned who it is, but I'm not going to run it.
Well,
but,
and I believe Caroline has a picture on the internet, which I don't care about either. I don't. The naming is irrelevant for this. It's the fact. So.
Right, exactly. But I think the way that they've done it, clearly it has the effect. If somebody, one of the witnesses, I think it's the one called Kate, she testified publicly in her own name not long ago in the same courthouse. After Epstein died, Judge Berman, who's a judge here, Judge Richard M. Berman, kind of lost the big case he would have had with Epstein. And so, because there's a big push for like victims' rights, he said, even the defendant is dead, we're going to have a wake, a kind of reverse wake, where like the people who would have testified at trial are going to come and we're going to like do it in that way. And she testified under her real name. So I understand people might want to, it doesn't mean, you're allowed to do it this way. I will say this, and this is just an interesting fact. I have the Kevin Spacey is being sued by at least two here civilly, two young people that were young men and were they claim assaulted by him. I believe that they were, but that's neither here nor there. One wanted to was going under the name CD, a pseudonym or initials of a person sexually assaulted by Kevin Spacey. And he wanted to go forward with the case. And the Judge Kaplan, said, no, I'm not going to allow it. Because there's a kind of a due process thing. You want to be able to do your research into your accuser. If you want to confront your accuser, don't you have a right to, within reason, right? It would be different. If it's a 7-year-old kid, they're going to have a screen. There's going to be indirect questioning. But if it's somebody that's actually sued you from, I don't know. So that's and I believe that they have done that intentionally. I think one reason I stay away from that is we now have the worst of both worlds, because Judge Nathan has used this, and she's been as you may have heard, she's been nominated to rise higher in the system to the appeals court, and there's a lot of theories about that. She's a very smart judge, and she's not always
and just to clarify what Robert explained to me, nominated but not yet appointed. So it's sort of the carrot's there, but she hasn't yet moved fast enough to bite the carrot.
She has to go through the Senate process. I don't think that Biden would withdraw it. It would look strange. But I think you get nominated and then you go through a process in the Senate, and probably, she's viewed as a Democrat. Many Republicans will automatically vote against her. But if she flubs this, it's added some more pressure to how she performs in this. But I think at a minimum she wants to, and she may legitimately believe there are, like the judge Kaplan, who's an elderly gentleman and a very smart guy, white shoe law firm. A lot of people don't like him because he really went after a lawyer called Donziger. I don't know if you know about this case. He was an environmental lawyer. Environmental lawyer that sued Chevron in Ecuador for poisoning indigenous lands, and he won a $6 billion verdict. But then the idea was that he paid bribes to the Ecuadorian judiciary. So they've been going after him for years, and he's now in jail for discovery violations. And just so a lot of people like Roger Waters, a lot of Susan Sarandon, he's become a very progressive environmental cause célèbre, and Judge Kaplan is on the receiving end of like, this guy is like pro Chevron. So, but he's also pro due process. He doesn't he's not allowing anonymous victims to go after Kevin Spacey. So Judge Nathan is a different judge. She's trying to say, I'm very much in favor of this, victims' rights. You don't have to give your name, but she's not actually policing it against these. When these flubs happen, they don't say, if you do that again, I'm going to impose sanctions. If you do that again, I guess because it's unclear what sanctions can she impose. Also, it could give Maxwell grounds for appeal, right? If she says, you've done it again, you're out. Mr. Pagliuca or Mr. Everdale, you're out. You can no longer defend. She's going to say, I don't have a choice. I have a right to choose counsel. So she's just trying to get through it. But she's using this desire for secrecy to black out Bill Clinton's name from the flight logs. No, he's not a victim. You know what I mean? So you need to be very clear.
And Matthew, just so we're clear also, sure. Bill Clinton's name is not new to anybody on earth who's been paying attention for the little while.
I'm sure, Antonio Guterres, this is a name to look out for. Just planting it in.
He's a film director, right?
No, he's the Secretary General of the United Nations. Antonio Guterres, former Prime Minister of Portugal. You heard it here first. They refuse. Yeah, check him out. Yeah, it's incredible.
I don't want to look
like Kofi Annan, right? This is what's going wrong with the UN. Everyone knew who Kofi Annan was. No one's heard of this guy. He lives in a mansion.
He occupies the same position as Kofi Annan in the UN,
and yet no one has ever heard of him. And he's able to do any goddamn thing he wants. He disappeared once from New York for 3 weeks, and nobody but inner city press reported him. The journalists were taking the press releases that he was deeply concerned about, guinea worm in Central African Republic, and they were saying, like, he's staying up all night. He's so deeply concerned. He was lying on a beach in Portugal for 3 weeks, and no one even said he was out of the country. So I said, this is outrageous. When Trump, like him or leave him, any president, including Biden, he goes to Wilmington, Delaware. You're on the press list. You have a pool report. He scratched his nose. He ate an ice cream cone. Antonio Guterres disappears for 3 weeks. He could be dead. Nobody knows. Nobody cares. You're paying your taxes to have a guy live with no. Yeah, that's him.
This is him. But I know the face. I just didn't know the name, and now I'm like, okay.
Yeah, now you know. Now, and I want to say this
Kofi Annan's replacement.
Yes. There was one guy in between called Ban Ki-moon. You may have heard of it.
Yeah, I remember Ban Ki-moon.
This guy has figured it out. He's like a reverse Epstein. He's figured out he really is. He's figured out the secret way to just, and it's all tax exempt. $400,000 a year salary, no tax at all. He lives in a mansion. I've done some live streams in front of it, but I don't want to be called the doxing, so I won't say where it is. But that's in other ways like Epstein. He lives alone in a mansion, serviced by a staff that you, the taxpayer, pay for. Any critic he can have beaten up and thrown out. He can oversee. This is one thing I want to go back to this. This is worse than Epstein. Okay, it wasn't just cholera in Haiti. The UN runs peacekeeping missions. That's all to the good. There are many countries that are, have the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Central African Republic. There are constant attempts to overthrow the government. So the world says, well, we don't really want. Let's get together some money, and we'll send soldiers from Cameroon to go and put on a blue helmet and stand and try to keep the peace in a place that's even slightly worse than their place. The problem is many of these soldiers commit rapes, and not just of 17-year-old girls. We're going to go down to 5-year-old. There are UN cases of going that low. And here's the killer: nothing happens to them. This is, of all the issues that I know, it's the one that makes me the angriest. There is not just that they're acquitted or not tried. They're not put on trial. The places where they go and commit these acts have no right to prosecute them. And there is no system in place to ensure that they're prosecuted back home. And there's no UN prosecution.
But by the way, Matthew,
the last thing they say is, we couldn't do these good works. We couldn't send peacekeepers if they were going to be held accountable. So you have to just let us do it this way. And I say, no, if you can't hold them accountable, don't send them. Just back it up.
Do you follow? I'm going to sound like the absolute conspiracy theorist. Do you listen to Alex Jones and follow what he?
I don't. If he got into the UN beat, I might check him out. But it's very discredited here. It's a shame. But
I know.
I'm covering that case here. Some people think the government got a subpoena to go into the guy's house and take the Ashley Biden. I'm covering that. I feel like whatever you may think of Project Veritas, when the government's coming in to seize documents from your home, the warrant should be public. I totally
and that my video today was supposed to be Project Veritas's judgment ordering a special master.
Sure,
I forget what her name was. I didn't get around to it because I was fixated on the Alec Baldwin admissions.
Sure. I've noticed. I like your mix. There's
my own personal interest. There's other people's interest, and then there's newsworthy stuff. Yeah, but I'm fixated on Baldwin because I think the dude has done something that he cannot bring himself to admit, but he knows he did it. But separate story. So the whole thing about the UN. I mean, it's the sending troops in. We know what they do. We know why people don't want UN troops in. It's just the world is disgusting, and then you just have to live in your basement.
Right. This should absolutely be cleaned up. And I'm going to self-servingly say this. Here's how low it's gotten. Maybe it's true. Maybe they couldn't get Cameroon to send soldiers if they were going to be held accountable. I think they sure shouldn't send them. But here's what they've done. When I was at the UN, no one else would even ask about this. Basically, I'm there. The information comes in, I go and I ask, and at least under Ban Ki-moon, they would give me a little paragraph. I'd say, there's a new case. There's a new allegation of this thing happened in DRC. What's happening? They say, wait here. Here it is. It's a paragraph. It says, we're looking into it. UNICEF is counseling. We're trying to establish paternity. There was never accountability, but they don't do that anymore. They literally say, and they threw me out, and they initially said, we're still going to answer your written questions. You're too dangerous to have in the building, but you just email us and we're going to send you that paragraph. It's easy. The paragraph, they already have the paragraph. They don't do that anymore. And and yet they go and give speeches about transparency. I think it's really, there's a lot of bad politicians in the world. There's a lot of lying. There's a lot of hypocrisy. This is the worst. It's a circus of, they say they're for freedom of the press, but they throw out the press. They say yesterday was, I think, the day of anti-corruption for them. When it's a place where for $25,000 in a paper bag, you can buy a UN document.
Matthew, that's not corruption. That's good politics, sir. You have to learn the distinction.
And then you have good meaning countries. The problem that you have is countries like Canada. I once asked Justin Trudeau like something, and he was like, "No, I'm not going to reward bad behavior." And he called, "You're not accredited, sir. How dare you?" I was accredited. It was insane, but it was like, I think what happens, it's the worst of all worlds, because good, well-meaning countries, the Scandinavian countries, Justin Trudeau, they want to believe in multilateralism. This is a fine thing. They want to believe in working with others to bring, and so they just turn a blind eye to child abuse of the worst kind, and they are responsible for it. Then,
Matthew, I ran for the People's Party of Canada, which we got 3.5% of the vote. I got 3.5%. We got 5% nationwide.
Whoa.
They don't turn a blind eye. Justin Trudeau conducts himself like he wants to be the next UN. He wants to be the next Ban Ki-moon and the other guy. Yeah. He wants to lead an international cartel to the detriment of his citizens. And that's his choice. And it's ours if we vote him in again. But so I'm detecting a slight anti-UN bias, which I'm
very open about it. I'm very open about it, because what I like about it is it's not just philosophical. Like I go on like, here's the way I view it. Then we can switch back to anything that you like. As I was there, I came to see and specialize in sort of UN victims, not people that didn't like the UN because they lived in, they saw stuff, environmental dictators. People. One of the first stories I got there, I was just like I just gotten in, got my pad. People were sending me emails. A guy in Sierra Leone, there was a peacekeeping mission that had been sent in after the civil war in Sierra Leone. UN truck is driving down the road, runs over a guy's kid, kills the kid. The father goes to the gate of the UN, says, "You killed my kid." He said, "Sorry, bro. We don't have to do anything. Total immunity. Not that $100 would do anything. Not that $1,000, nothing. Absolutely zero." So they send me this information. I go to the noon briefing. Every day the UN has it. They read out press releases. We're doing this. We're doing great things. Any questions? The questions are things like, are you deeply concerned about the most recent North Korea nuclear test? Like, what's he going to say? Of course I'm deeply concerned. They're like, whoa, he exists. He's deeply concerned. I said, what about this kid that was run over in Sierra Leone? And they, what? It's too small. Afterwards, they approach me in the hall and they say, that's not what this briefing is about. That's not what this is for. But I said, it better be for it, because you did it. You did it. This is real.
Matthew, I'm going to ask you this question. This is my own personal neuroses, my own personal hang-up. They stop you and they say, that's not what this press conference
was. They told it. I can tell you who said it. Michelle Montes. She was the spokeswoman at the time.
Does your heart start beating fast? Like, holy crap, what the heck was that all about? And like, am I now a target? Like, I became, and I didn't realize that it would go that way. I became targeted. They threw me out of my office first and said, you can't go where the other journalists go. You have to have a special pass to go in front of the Security Council. They said, you can't have that anymore unless we escort you. So if there was a period of about 2 years where I had a minder, I would push the limit. I would say, I have every right to go. Give me a minder. And they would have a person standing next to me asking, who did you come to speak to? I said, I'm reporting on the UN. I'm asking countries if they think Antonio Guterres is corrupt. You can't have Antonio Guterres' minder. I mean, is this North Korea? So eventually they just went whole hog and said, you're out of here. They just started following me around. But it's just amazing. I don't mean, but I guess my point is, one of the reasons I'm not letting it go, and I could, like some people have said, look, the courthouse, it's great. You're doing great. The UN is boring. Even if you were there, you're just going to sit there and listen to all this fake news about deep concern. I have questions that I want to ask them, including about Ghislaine Maxwell and Terramar, but also what's happening in the Central African Republic and stuff. And I also think that most of the people that the UN screws have no recourse. I have maybe no recourse, but I'm tweeting. I'm in New York City. I can go stand. I feel I should do something. No, but you have a voice and people are listening. But then that's your recourse. It's not monetary. It's not political.
Right. Exactly. I feel I should do it because maybe I could say, the UN is corrupt, but the courthouse is going so well, and like people are joining my Patreon, and like I'll just cover Maxwell. It's there's a lot of interest. It's more interesting. It's engaging, and it's all true. But I think back to the guy with his kid run over. I went on a Security Council trip to Haiti. I saw how much people so I just felt, and I think it's good. I don't want to be. I mean, this is it's neither here nor there, but the sort of friend of all the world. I think it's good as an advocate or as an investigative journalist or as a lawyer. It's good to be able to relate to your client. You don't want to be so close that you're not objective. You want a cool-headed doctor, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's good. I think the best work is done when there's this strange marriage of passions and desire for justice, maybe for different reasons. But you've got to have it. Otherwise, it's just another thing. It's just another business. And I feel in that like it should be done because I can do it. And so maybe it's 25% of my time. Maybe now it's down to 20. Some days it's less. Some days it's more. But I definitely feel like it should not be left alone. And here's the real killer. I'm of two minds. So there's no real legal recourse, but there ought to be. I think that there probably are ways. Some of the guards that threw me out are American citizens, so they're not really immune. And the spokesman is half American citizen. So you could come up with ways. So a law firm, and I'm gonna name them because I think it's to their credit. Quinn Emanuel, it's a big law firm. It's a big corporate law firm here in New York. They do a lot of great litigation. Much to their credit, they agreed to, I don't know if it's represent, they agreed to take up this cause. And they wrote to the UN and they said very politely, I didn't like the letter. I thought the letter was way too friendly. The letter said like, it's been 2 years. What's the process? You say you believe in this. Let's sit down and let's have a dialogue. And I want to tell you,
2 years.
That's correct. Nothing. No answer at all. One of a colleague journalist of mine asked in the briefing, "What about this?" He said, "I don't think we're going to respond to it." So it's shocking to me because almost anywhere else they'd at least have to say, we tried, we spoke with him, but we don't think he's going to. I think what they're afraid is if they would basically like to say, "You can come back in if you don't say anything against Guterres." But of course, you can't do that. No one told the press corps at the White House to do that about Trump. Every time he threw people out, they went crazy and they got back in. That's what the law is. That's what I mean. You have to put up with criticism. That's the price of being in a free society. But it's not a free society there. So I'm disappointed that I'm now you as a lawyer. Like I'm a lawyer, I could sue the UN. I kind of don't want to be this like. A lawyer that as his own client is a fool, etc. Whatever. Well, I don't feel it should be that quixotic. I feel like there should be some serious legal firepower, even if it's from the conservative side. I don't care about the politics of it because it's unacceptable to have, particularly if you believe in multilateralism. If people believe in international law, you cannot have this type of hypocrisy at the top. It's too much.
I'm going to just say this because ordinarily my camera is here, but sure. And Matthew, I enjoy looking at your eyes, which is why I'm looking down more than in normal. Because there's a certain degree of intensity, there's a certain degree of trauma, and there's a certain degree of
could be this darkness. I think the lights went off here in the press.
Matthew, it's because I have a window into your soul, and it's through your eyes, and it's there's. I'm not trying to be pretentious. Yeah. It's actually you can tell sincerity when you see it, and you can tell insincerity when you see it. And I want to bring this one up at the same time. Matt, a good moral man. Has he watched Fall of Cabal by Janet Osgood, where she exposes UN?
I'm going to write it down. This is my pad, and I'll write it down and see it. There definitely are
because now I may be projecting. I may be seeing trauma in your eyes that is not there.
But I will say I have people that are quite close to me. It is. I'll at some point I can send you. I actually was live streaming when this thing took place, and it's not as bad. I was in the Bronx. I've seen a lot of things, but it was pretty shocking to me. They literally I had just interviewed the ambassador of Cameroon. It was like 11 p.m., but they were having a budget meeting. I was absolutely allowed to be there, and these guys had been apparently they grabbed me and they said, "That's it, you're going." And I said, "I'm sorry. You're why are you touching me?" They grabbed my computer and jammed it into my backpack, and then when I said, "Wait a second." I'm speaking to the ambassador of Cameroon. The guy twists my arm like a baseball bat, because they realized nothing can be done.
Well, and
I went to the police precinct and they said, if it happened in UN grounds, there's nothing we can do. We're not going to do anything.
But
Sure.
that's the real traumatizing thing here. It's like seeing random violence, seeing a traumatic
Yeah,
incident, fine. When you
sure.
realize that the institutional powers that govern the world are
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally corrupt and, dare I say, I don't want to say evil, but they
Yeah.
have tinges of evil. Then you're
Sure.
like, then you look around and think, holy crap, we are but ants in a, what's
Yeah.
the thing where the ants live?
The hill, the ant
Well,
hill.
yeah, the ant house. We're
Right.
literally but ants, and we're being governed by people who are literally above the law. And if they
Mhm.
wanted to break my arm and then
Right.
cover it up, they could have done it just as easily. And then you have next level cynicism of the world.
Yeah. No, it's
And
true. And I mean, I think I'm going to go back full circle. Like I'm listening now, and I don't know if this is. I know that in terms of like the UN's victims, I feel very much like I'm still here to like say, hey, what's going on? But I mean, even in one of these stories, and I think I want to bring it back to the reality of this. All big names and all cabals aside, and this happens. Epstein's not the only short eyes on the block, but it's totally credible to me that if you take a 14-year-old girl into this gated compound in Palm Beach, put her alone in a massage room, and Ghislaine Maxwell is the one, like, let's say, bringing and paying the cash when she comes out, but not in the room, and you set the timer for an hour, and he's talking on the phone, trading West Western stocks or stealing his money, saying do this and that, and at a certain point he just reaches out and does something outrageous. What's the person going to do? Like, they don't even know if they can get out of the compound, right? They don't know if they say, hey, stop. No means no, if they're going to actually be able to get out of the compound. They're living, maybe they're not even, one of the victims in this case was not even like living with her mother. Like the mother had some big problems, so she was staying with friends. Like they could just disappear. But I can understand. Like some people are cynical and look at this and say like, hey, they could have stopped it. And in many of these cases, it's tragic because these things happen and then they went back. And they went back from age 14 to 18. And then Epstein said, you're aging out. It's time for you to send me your younger friends. So this is how, but
Yep.
I can see that. And I think that ultimately, like all big, maybe that's the prosecution's, dice roll. Like if I was on the jury, it's this witness, Carolyn, it's these stories of just the very specific soul crushing, assertion of power and kind of pleasure in it. Like that one, the woman that he said to, like, you'll find you're going to get nowhere with that. Man, the bad boyfriend says that too, but this guy really means it. And you're going to see, he's not going to get arrested. And so I think that there is this kind of, I mean, when even a week ago, when I first started tweeting this trial, I made the mistake of like, one of the victims blocked me on Twitter. And I'm used to, from my UN days, like saying, look, the Chinese ambassador is blocking me. Let me take a picture and say, why is this happening? And I did it. And I got a lot of like victim supporters saying, come on, she's traumatized. What are you doing? And I don't take things down. So I did say mea culpa. I said, I sort of have brought my old, but it's, there's this, I think that for a lot of people, and I try to not be like that to project and it symbolizes the imbalance of power and the absolute impunity, and that would be the connection to the UN for sure. But it symbolizes that above the law in a way that crack dealers on Long Island enslaving girls for crack. I think it's terrible. I covered that trial too, but there's more to it. It's so outrageous,
It's not low level street crack. This is upper echelon political crack, and it's not crack. It's just sexual stuff.
Yeah.
And I just want to bring this one up because this was not the right one here. Sorry, and I didn't mean to be disrespectful. Hold on.
No, not
Something
at all.
to work with. I like the idea of shining a light on those effers, which I don't mind. I didn't mean to disregard this.
No, I agree. I think
Maxwell threatened many girls. This is my thing. It's like my deep black pill is he doesn't have to do any of that. He doesn't have to end anybody's life. All that he has to do is destroy their lives. It's actually easier than killing them because it leaves less evidence. Like, okay, go ahead and see what you can do. I'll ruin your life. No one will believe you. You're going to be an abused, distrusted person who sold themselves for money. And good luck trying to tell anybody anything. I'm friends with Prince Andrew and whomever else.
But again, this is actually going to sound absolutely insane because I'm not trying to play the victim here, but because you went this psychological route, is even, let's say, as a journalist, right? So this happened at the UN. Now I'm at the courts. I'm getting some play. Some people are saying, wow, this guy's a great court reporter. And I'm like, it really suits my skill set. I like it. I'm a lawyer. I understand what the things are. I run around. I've gotten to know a lot of people. I've got sources. People call me up, say, this is happening secretly in this courtroom. I'll go. And like, it's sort of part of me, or I could imagine someone saying, forget about the UN. Like even if it was wrong, what happened to you, if you say you were thrown out of your last beat, how are you, you're not like these other journalists. Like real journalists don't get thrown off a beat because they are thinking that the law applies, whatever it is. But so I'm not at all trying to put myself in the shoes of those people, but I feel it's important. Like I sometimes, should those victims have just moved on? Should they have just said, this happened to me when I was 14, let me just, and I'm sure some did, but some didn't. And some didn't because they couldn't help it. But some may have chosen to say, no, like this is wrong. I'm not gonna stop until something happens. And then Epstein is dead, and they're left like, without, and so now there's this. And she was a big deal. She was definitely a part of this. Whether she was, the main malefactor, I don't. It's not clear to me.
All right, now if we start winding it down only in terms of Ghislaine Maxwell, sure. Matthew. I think we're doing another stream in the future. I think it's
no. It's been really. I'm sorry to have gone on so many tangents, but
don't apologize for anything. It's been amazing, and there's so much more that I would love to delve into, and sure. we will do it. To summarize where we are with the trial right now, because I didn't realize that it was actually sort of quasi coming to an end because of the development today.
Not because of development yesterday. Basically, when the trial began, this hopefully will be more cogent. It was estimated to take 5 to 6 weeks, and it was going to begin on November 29th. So they told prospective jurors, you need to be ready to serve until the middle of January. So
expect to ruin your Christmas is what they basically
absolutely.
said.
And it's going to be meeting both of those 2 weeks, except for the Thursday and Friday. And initially she was going to have the Thursday meeting. In any event, that was said, and that sort of bakes in, like usually a defense case doesn't last long. Some defendants don't put on a case at all. Most defendants don't testify. In any event, this would have meant probably a 4-week presentation by the government. And it seemed to be going faster than it seemed, but also some witnesses got knocked off. And also we don't have the full witness list. Suddenly they announced on day 8, so in the middle of the second week, that they were going to close by the end of the week, rest their case, which was basically cutting in half the time they would have done. Now, many people said, wow, they're just dropping, they're trying to close it out fast and like win or lose, just keep the evidence from coming out. I don't know what happened. Personally, I think you'd want to err on the side, even if your lone focus was convicting Ghislaine Maxwell, you're going to want to run more victims up the pole because some are going to be knocked out. It's like anything. It's like, some the cross-examinations are vicious, but they may be effective. And so basically it's starting to look like, had this illness not taken place today, tomorrow would have been the last day of the government's case. And then there was already talk of when the charging conference is going to be. So basically the jury could get the case like next week and you could have a verdict, by Christmas, instead of January 15th. Now it's unclear. And it's also unclear even if there will be trial tomorrow. Like it sounds like there might be, but they left it wide open. They left it wide open as to, and we're waiting to get an email of like, I'm going to come in anyway. There's a lot of stuff that I sort of have missed my normal grazing around the courthouse.
I had no idea. By the way, if anyone wants to go back and look at one of my older vlogs, I did a breakdown of Kevin Spacey, a body language reading. It was a tongue in cheek, but it was sort of like when he was drinking from that coffee cup in his Christmas outfit. I think it was 2018. Yeah, I had no idea his trial came to. I had no idea his trial was going on.
It's still not at the trial stage. They're still deposing. There's still depositions of a guy, of a musician. There's all, these cases take a long time, and I think it's been there's another guy called Nygaard. He's a Canadian. He's one of your guys.
Oh, I know Nygaard.
Trial down here, Nygaard.
There's
also a UN connection. I wrote the Nygaard UN connection, and there is one. Impunity draws, the impune.
Almost as fast as Frei. He ain't a lawyer, dude. Unless Matthew, you lied to me. The internet's forever. Everyone's gonna pick apart anything.
I'm actually referenced one of the court filings I did here to get Michael Avenatti's financial disclosure unsealed. Michael Avenatti on trial. He lost the Nike trial, and I live tweeted that, and there were a lot of people interested in that case for extorting Nike about about having mistreated a basketball coach that he then didn't pay. Now he has another trial coming up.
I did a few vlogs on Avenatti and that particular.
It was a great trial. I mean, I love that. Was that when I first got here? I was like, "Whoa, this is great." So then Avenatti said, "I'm down on my luck. I can't pay my lawyers anymore. I want a publicly funded lawyer, and I'm going to turn in an affidavit to say why I should get a publicly funded lawyer, but my affidavit is secret." So I wrote to the judge, Judge Furman, and I said, "No, this has to be public. It's a use of public funds." He's also asking me to rule. And to his credit, the judge said, "Mr. Lee, a member of this bar," because I'm a member of the bar of the SDNY. Like I could turncoat tomorrow and bring a suit, but I'm not doing it yet. But he said, so it's not just me saying it. He ran through the names on the list and said, but the one thing about that is that although it might suit me to say, like, I'm a lawyer, you should unseal, I don't think it should be that way. I don't think you should have to be a lawyer to get something unsealed. I think you should be able to be. I'm constantly thinking of the guy on the vacant lot that was cooking Coochie Fritos, or like a blogger. There's this sense of the media that, like, it's all about them. It's like, we need the seats, and like, I feel like you always want, you want these crazy guys out with the live streaming in front of 44. I stopped today to talk to one guy who's not by no means crazy, who's covering the trial, and then some even crazier guy came along, and I was like, sure, let's go. What are you doing? Then some professional cameraman handed him $20 to go away and said, "Be quiet, go get yourself a tea." First, I thought it was humanitarian, and then I realized it was just so they could get their daily shot of Maxwell's lawyers going into the courthouse. There's a whole industry. It's a news industry down here where, like, the same shot of the same lawyers with the same masks walking in the same door are taken every day, and you'll see them on Reuters. They're worth something. But
I'm going to read Zark Muckerberg with freaking alien eyes. Says, chats are great when mods don't censor everything. I
was joking about the cheat sheet. I just thought it was funny.
No, forget that. I don't have mods. I am the mod. I mod this as we go.
I think that's the best way to go.
And by the way, not so that I can censor more, just so that I don't have someone to blame if someone censors someone who should not have been censored.
Correct.
Hey, dude, say something anti whatever. Unless it's a direct threat, it's not going to get flagged. But
no, sure, definitely. I also want I'm going to not take advantage of this. So I've been, and this is again the kind of thing of like, do you want to be seen as a professional journalist or not? Like, I feel like journalism is an activity. Journalism is taking information that people want to know and trying to provide it to them in a way that's pretty objective. But that doesn't mean that you don't have your views, or even in the case of this, since I've been here, I've started every weekend now. I write an SDNY song. I wrote a song about this, whatever. So,
Matt, if I may ask you, I received the blues song that I heard.
Sure.
Was that your song?
That is my song.
Okay.
I have insurrection. I used to have the ones about the DC cases. I've done about 5 on the Maxwell trial. It's kind of easy. It's like the Mexican drug gangs, like it's news in a song. It's like saying motion in limine.
Matthew. Bear in mind, most people watching don't know what you're talking about because I received it. I didn't share it because I didn't know what it was, and I'm not going to share it.
You know what it is? I sometimes start these threads of the day's thing. One of them now has like 250,000 views on Twitter, but it's because it's like the top of the thread. But I think it's a good form. I think you want to reach people where they are. My point in bringing this up wasn't to say, like, go check out the song, and is to say I put them up on Twitter, but I also put them on YouTube just so they'll be. I do a video with it, and it's very easy. There's video of Ghislaine Maxwell at the UN, and I love anything I can do to make people see it. I'll do it. I put it on YouTube, and it immediately says this can't be monetized. And maybe it's because of these magical words of the activities they believed in, or maybe it's because. I'll give you an example, and this is going to sound conspiratorial. The big media platforms have partnered with the United Nations. I kid you not. The UN has decided to become the arbiter for Google and others of what is verifiable information.
Yeah.
They're fighting the info pandemic, the bad information pandemic. The only thing is they're conflicted. It's not just anti-vaxxers. Anti-Antonio Guterres is also bad information that must be devalued, shadow banned, demonetized. You know what I mean? And and these guys don't realize, like, you're dealing with an organization that's sending peacekeepers to take advantage of 5-year-olds, and then you're giving them the keys to your platform. It's insane.
Matthew, I'm not laughing at what you just said at all.
You can play the song.
I can't play it. I'm not playing it. When I got it, I was like, all right, dude, I don't know where this song came from. If
Okay.
so
If
Matthew,
you give me 5 seconds, I can get my other laptop and I will play it for you.
dude, I'm not
All right.
trying to get.
You don't like that
I'm not
kind of
trying to get
quality.
my channel shut down. Just
All right.
tell people where they can go.
No. I'm just saying it doesn't have any dirty words. I think when they see the topic, but what's strange to me is that why would this be not monetizable when a CNN report saying using exactly those words is totally fine, right? So they obviously have a different. They must categorize different forms of media and say like we're just going to take it for granted.
They flag words. It's a Venn diagram. Flag words, flag channel sizes, and when it overlaps, demonetize.
Right.
Fox News using the words doesn't matter.
Okay. But did you see what happened with the New York Post and the Hunter Biden story? And I say this not to be political. That's a major publication, and they decided that you couldn't share the story, which turned out to be totally true. So it's not size doesn't matter in some sense when they really get rolling, you know.
Well, here, I'm going to do this. Jenny B says, Viva, can you explain the 4 different pills again? Which means that you've heard it, Jenny. You got your blue pill, which is go back to your life. You got your red pill, which is you've awakened to the new life. You've gotten your black pill, which means you are cynicized by the new life that you've discovered after your red pill. And then you get your white pill. Oh, shoot. I mess it up every time. You get your white pill, which means you have faith again.
Okay.
But then there's the jagged black pill, which goes up your butt, and you realize that there's no hope. Everyone's doomed, and we are but ants in a farm. By the way, Matthew, ant farm is the word I'm looking for.
Oh, that farm. Yeah, exactly. I've heard it. I don't know why I said hill.
No. It also makes sense too, but depending on what your internal framework.
So I'll say, since you won't play the song, I'll say if you go to the threads of this court case, you'll find them at the top of many of them, and they're pretty. I was acoustic, and then the neck of the guitar broke, so I've gotten the cheapest electric.
It's innocuous. It's innocuous. It's innocuous.
Yeah,
except politically, it's not politically innocuous.
And I also just think I guess I view it like I'm putting in a lot of time. It's not, to me, it's more than a job. I'm interested in it. And I think, every once in a while, like here, I'm legitimately interested in this, Maxwell. There's something about this thing, the way it intersects with the UN, it doesn't feel, when I first got here and I saw the certain hoopla cases, I was kind of angry. And I was like, this is BS. The only part of this courthouse that gets covered are these, hoopla cases. And then there's all the other cases. But now I see you can do both. And it's sort of like what you said. You have to take people where you find them. Like, I think more people should understand how the law works and like, the mistakes that are made, and sometimes people are unfair and don't understand why something is done the way it is. And you have to take it on the cases that people care about. That may be why. I'm not saying that that's why you're doing Alex Baldwin, but maybe it is, No.
Well, forget that. No, my thing is, I want to praise my own observational skills. I knew this was personal to you for whatever the reason, above and beyond the subject matter. Right. I thought maybe the subject matter was personal to you because anybody watching me knows that I immediately go to like daddy issues with Scott Adams, with whomever.
Right.
So no, it's this is not childhood stuff. This is just professional stuff. You've been
I don't like exactly.
You've been fucked by the UN, and now you have been exposed to Ghislaine Maxwell by the UN, and now it's trial time.
Yeah.
And
it's time. It's like, hey, check it out. Like I send them every day. Every day during the trial, I've sent them an email with a question, and I send them questions about. I mean, I still follow Burma and the coup and all this stuff. In almost every place, the UN is doing bad work. But I've sent them that question, which I feel they have to answer. And let me explain this. It's not just that she had a press conference. I don't know why I didn't get this earlier. One way, once Epstein went to jail and Ghislaine Maxwell knew that she would probably be next at some point, she tried to rehabilitate herself. And so she started a nonprofit that was called the Terramar Project. It said that she cared about the oceans. It said you could get a passport that you were a friend of the ocean. Yeah. And that's what she came. That's what she came to the UN to promote. That's why she got the press conference. Well, the Terramar Project had a board of directors of only 5 people, 3 of which were her own relatives, some of whom have come to the trial. One of whom was the UN, Antonio Guterres' head of partnerships, a man named Amir Dosal, and he was on the board. So to me, it's a very fair question. Why? Why, with only 5 seats on the board of a reputed pedophile running a scam nonprofit, why is the UN one of the 5? And do you have any response? Do you have any second thoughts? Or is there any greater vetting that should be done? And they simply refuse to answer the question. So every day I email it to them. And then I do usually a tweet saying like, today I did some commentary on their noon briefing. I like held up my phone to them saying the good news about this, that, and the other thing. I've sort of stopped doing that. But I feel it's important. I feel like like it's significant to me that you're a bright and newsy person that you didn't even know who Antonio Guterres.
No,
is. Like perfect power. It's like with the Wizard of Oz. It's not even that he's that powerful, but like when you hear, and the Biden administration says it, when you hear progressive governments saying we want to play well with others, we want to join the multilateral world, we believe in these, treaty systems and all this. This is what they're supporting. Like, if you want to support that, then make it credible. At least get somebody that's not, a vindictive, corrupt, bribe-taking, pedophile defender. It's nothing. You could find a better guy in any, foreign policy school anywhere in the world.
Okay, and that I think is going to be where we're going to wind this up, Matthew.
Okay.
So hold on. The most important thing, where can people find you on various social media?
The best, these 3 words, Inner City Press, are probably the best way. At Inner City Press, all one word, on Twitter. We have a YouTube channel, although apparently not as high-tech as yours. InnerCityPress.com. If you want to support it, there's also a Patreon at Matthew Russell /Lee. There you'll find links of other ways. I have a Substack. So basically all of the main things. But Inner City Press is the concept. If you just Google it around, you'll find these various feeds. I don't know. I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have the word vlog with a W in it trademarked? Is it?
Oh, sir, I have applied for the trademark. I'm still waiting. 2018 in Canada. Still haven't gotten my answer yet.
I just thought I hadn't actually realized it. I think I'd speed read it and saw vlog, which I've started. I had
Dude, just so long as you're not selling shirts with a vlog on it, I'm not even sure what I would do if you did. But I applied in Canada.
I've never sold shirts in my life.
No. That was tongue in cheek. I applied for it.
It's not because of the dog. You go one step further by tying it into the dog. I think what I've actually realized in covering these cases is that I don't want to be kind of pedantic or like, that's why I don't walk around here saying like I'm a lawyer. But it's interesting. I find it interesting. I think it's a high point. I often find myself being kind of like defending the law to people. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm sure you do too. Like, it's not perfect, but like, these are the rules. Like, why do we throw out evidence, even if somebody has like a bloody knife in their apartment, but the police broke down the door and went in? Why do we throw it out? Like, I'm not saying maybe we feel differently, but I like to think like, it is better to live. Like, I wish the UN had a law. If the UN had a law, that wouldn't have happened to me. And if there was law enforcement in this case that we're talking about, these other things wouldn't happen. Like, it's not perfect, and there's a lot of hypocrisy, and there's a lot of. But if you keep pushing it, I hate to be kind of middle of the road and ameliorative, but I've come around. I've come around to see like there's a lot of times that the law, like when the city threw the homesteaders out, that was bull. There's a lot of times it's abused, but the ideal of it, that people get a day in court, that you can talk before they just crush you, that there are limits to what even the most powerful can do. These are excellent ideas of which I'm going to sing every weekend.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. The ideal of justice is never something to lose. And Matthew, keep pursuing it because you're doing God's work. Well, I don't even know what your politics are, actually.
Sure.
I don't even know. But it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Yeah. You're doing God's work. The truth is apolitical. So keep doing it. All right. I will put all your links in the pinned comment.
Okay. That's great. It's really been fun. I liked when I saw you doing your voiceover in the car about democracy dying, and I like the whole thing. That's been kind of my way to do it. It's kind of informal, a little bit. It's good, and I think
it's amazing because I've only seen you on Twitter. I've only seen your videos, and I know what I thought, but right. You're deep. You are a deeper character, and I think everyone watching now appreciates.
All right,
you're a deeper character than what
you can't always be at this at this level. You gotta keep and I think it's there's something. I will say this. I found that there's something about this live tweeting of trials I really like. It's not just. There's something artistic about it. You're choosing, but you also try to be fair, but you try to, it's people should know how they're doing the cross-examination, what's said, and when people object. Like, I find that I like it, and it seems that people do like it. And I do other things off it. I can write fiction about it. I can do a song about it. But the thing itself, I think, is a good thing, and it's something I intend to continue to do, as well as exposing corruption at the United Nations and elsewhere.
Keep doing it. Right. I will pin your links in the comment section. Matthew, stick around. We'll say our proper goodbyes. Everyone in the chat, first of all, people were asking for Winston before you leave. Winston, your breath smells. His breath smells terrible. But on that note, everyone in the chat, thank you very much. Share this away. Keep following. news soon in Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah.
Inner City Press, thank you very much. Matthew, stick around. We'll say our proper goodbyes. Everyone else, enjoy the rest of the evening.